everyone. My name is Hasiel. My friends call me Hasi, and I am super excited to be here today because I get to talk to you about one of my absolute favorite topics, emotions. Why do you think emotions are important? We all experience a wide range of emotions throughout the day, but why are they important? Why should they matter? Emotions impact and influence how we act, how much we pay attention to things, how well our memory works, the way that we learn, and even the decisions that we make. That is why it is important for all of us to recognize how we feel, what we're thinking, what's important to us, and how it's impacting our behavior. This is what we call being self-aware. We need to make sure that we're checking in with ourselves. How do I feel right now? A tool that we can use to recognize our emotions is called the mood meter. You'll see that my home mood meter is behind me on this wall. And today I will teach you how to make your own mood meter at home. The mood meter helps us grow what we call our social and emotional skills. An acronym that we can use, which is an abbreviation or a shorter way to remember things by using the first letter of each word, is ruler. Just like a ruler that we use to measure things in math, we can also use an acronym, ruler, that stands for each step that we need to take to be more self-aware. R for recognizing our emotions, U for understanding why we feel the way we do, L for labeling and describing our emotions, E for expressing our emotions, and finally, the last R, regulating emotions. It's important to remember that all emotions are acceptable. We tend to like to categorize things as good or bad or positive or negative, but all emotions are providing us information with things that we're perceiving in our environment and how that is affecting us. So really, all we need to do is learn how to manage them and understand them in an effective way. The mood meter focuses on two parts of what makes up an emotion. The first one is energy. So depending on how much energy we're feeling, that is going to affect the way that we feel at a particular moment. So energy is the first thing that it measures. And the second thing is what we call pleasantness. How pleasant or unpleasant are you feeling? So if you remember from maybe a math class or a geometry class, the x-axis, which is the horizontal line right here, this is the pleasantness. And this might be too small for you to see, but this right here says pleasantness. And then the y-axis, the vertical line, shows the energy. And I wrote it down here on a piece of paper. So thinking about how much energy you're feeling on a particular day, where this is low, so down here is low, and up here is high. So first you can ask yourself, what is my energy level? Do I have a lot of energy, or do I feel a little bit more on the downside? And you can kind of try to quantify it. And the way that I did my mood meter, and I'll take this off the wall so that you can see it a little bit closer. I happen to have construction paper in my house of all the different colors. So you can either use paint if you have that available and just paint a piece of paper in different colors, or you can use construction paper if you have that available. And what I did was create a little grid. So I did, since we're doing from low to high energy, low would be -5 and super high would be +5. And so you have to have enough space to do -5 to +5. And so I used my ruler to measure out the little spaces, and that is what I did for each of the colors. So for each of the 4 colors. So I'll paste it back up on the wall. But you can do this with any piece of paper, any colors that you have. You can get creative if you have any art supplies to make it. So we already talked about the energy and the pleasantness and the y-axis and the x-axis and what that represents. But what do each of the colors represent? Since there's 4 different colors, we call that a quadrant. And so starting out with the top one, with the red quadrant. So what emotions are kind of high in energy and high in unpleasantness? So those emotions are things like when you're feeling angry or when you're feeling frustrated or maybe anxious. Those emotions would be on the red. And then on the blue quadrant, just underneath it, those are the emotions that are sometimes unpleasant, but they're lower in energy. And so some examples of those are maybe when you're feeling bored or when you're feeling sad, or maybe you're feeling like you're in despair. All of those things fall under the blue. And then on the green quadrant, right next to those are the emotions that are pleasant and low in energy. So things like when you're feeling calm, like after meditating, for example, or if you're feeling tranquil or serenity, or even if you're just content, those kinds of emotions fall under the green quadrant. And then the yellow quadrant, last but not least, those are the emotions that are pleasant and high in energy. So think about emotions like excitement or joy, or when you're feeling very, very energetic, when you're elated about something. Those are the things that fall in the yellow quadrant. And so thinking about the different emotions, think about what your response is when someone asks you, how are you doing? Usually the things that we respond are things like, oh, I'm doing okay, or oh, I'm doing fine, or maybe I'm doing bad, or I'm happy. But the more we pay attention to things like that, the more we realize that we rely on the same words that don't really explain specifically how we're doing. Like being fine is kind of like a vague, like, well, why are you feeling fine? And so we encourage people to ask themselves throughout the day, like, how am I feeling right now? And why am I feeling this way? And is it being helpful, or should I try to change it? So being aware of our emotions is a very, very powerful thing. And another activity that we can do with the mood meter are getting better at recognizing emotions. And so one of the things that we encourage people to do is looking through magazines. So you can, if you have like old magazines laying around, and you can browse through them and you can find people and, or maybe like their facial expressions, and you can try cutting them out and guess or try to put an emotion to it, because it's important to go beyond those words that we usually use, like fine or okay, and really expand our vocabulary in terms of our feelings to better describe them. So I thought that we could walk through it, through some of the pictures that I found in my magazines, and see if we can identify an emotion to them. So hopefully you can see this. This is a person that is smiling really, really big. And so paying attention to the body language and the facial expressions and what message they're sending. To me, this person looks very, very happy. So happy that she's even like closing her eyes, and she just has like a huge beaming smile. So what do you think she's feeling? How do you think her energy is, or her pleasantness level is? My guess would be that she is feeling very happy and very energetic. So I would classify her as being in the yellow. So I'm going to use some tape. Oh, and I only use tape, like painter's tape, to tape these on the walls. So you won't have to worry about messing up your walls if you decide to do this. But if you have maybe like a cork board, you can also use like little pins to create your mood meter. There's so many different ways to create one. And Pinterest, of course, is full of very creative ways of doing your mood meter. So I'm going to put her on the yellow quadrants, and she seems to be very, very happy. And then the next one that we have is another woman, and hopefully you can see it. So she is not smiling as big as the previous image, but she still kind of has somewhat of a smile, and she looks very pensive to me, like she's like deep in thought. But what do you think? What does she look like? What does she feel? What are some ways to describe her, maybe? I think I would say that she looks calm, like she looks like she's in a relaxed place in her life. So that would be in the green quadrant. So maybe low energy, but very pleasant. So I'm going to classify her in the green as being calm. And the next one that we have, hopefully you'll be able to see her. She doesn't have a smile. Her eyebrows are kind of frowned. And we can't really see the rest of her body, but looking at her shoulders, it kind of indicates to me that she maybe has them crossed in front of her. And so I think maybe she's like upset or maybe uneasy about something. Sometimes when we start paying attention to how we're feeling, like if we're feeling angry, our body tends to respond to that and kind of help us express that. And so if I'm feeling angry, I might, like cross my arms and, kind of do something with my eyebrows or with my forehead to indicate that I'm not feeling happy at that time. So I'm going to put her in the red quadrant because I think she's upset about something. And keep in mind that we don't really have any context to these images. We're really making guesses as to what people are feeling based on their body language, their facial expressions, and really the best way to know how other people are feeling and really even how we're feeling ourselves is by asking. So make sure that we're not just making assumptions. Make sure that we ask, right? It's very important. And our very last image that I have for you, here, I'll show it to you. It's another woman. So she's not really smiling. And really this is just like her face that we're looking at. And when I saw this image, I think what I focused on the most were her eyes. If you can just see her eyes, there's something kind of sad about them to me. So I'm thinking like maybe she's upset about something, but she looks very calm. She doesn't look like she has a lot of energy. And this might be hard for you to tell, but her eyes are kind of watery too. So I'm wondering, has she been crying? Like maybe she's just blue about something. And so I'm going to put her on our blue quadrant over here. And I intentionally chose pictures in the magazines that I found that were big enough so that you could see it. But if you find smaller pictures, then you'll be able to plot different feelings or more feelings. And you could even, instead of cutting pictures, you could maybe try drawing them, or you could also try taking pictures of yourself. If you have maybe one of those Polaroids, and you can put them up, and you can kind of try and practice expressing different emotions. You can also try to maybe just write the words instead of using images. You can just write them and put them on there. And I know I already mentioned Pinterest, but a really great resource, of course, is the internet. And the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence has a lot of great things that we can look up to expand our emotions vocabulary. So I encourage you to check that out. So thinking about how, I think I mentioned earlier that emotions are helpful and that they're information. They're telling us, how we're feeling, and it's helpful to understand them. But then also thinking about how there are no good or bad emotions. What are some of the things that these feelings are helpful, maybe like in activities? So thinking about maybe activities that we engage in learning at home. So starting out with the red, some people would probably tell you that feeling unpleasant is never helpful in school, right? And maybe people are going to say, like, just avoid the red. No one wants to be in the red. But feeling slightly unpleasant is actually quite conducive to certain type of activities. So unpleasant and energetic moods are useful for maybe debating a topic that you feel really passionate about. Or maybe when you have to write an essay to persuade someone on a particular point of view, or maybe you are discussing historical injustices or like social injustice. So maybe things like that will make you feel like you're in the red, and it's conducive to the activity. It's helpful in the activity that you're doing. So being in the red is not bad, and it can even be helpful for different things. And it also makes me think of news stories that I hear sometimes about, car accidents happening and people rushing to the scene to help, and hearing about how incredible it was for someone to like lift a car and save someone else. When you think about what that person was feeling in that moment, they were probably not feeling calm, or they probably weren't feeling happy. They were probably feeling really worried and scared. And those emotions made their bodies create the adrenaline that they needed in order to do something as amazing as lifting a whole car to save someone, right? Or even thinking about more of a situation at school, like a fire drill or a tornado drill. Those are things that maybe put us on the red, but it makes our body aware in order to respond to the circumstances around us. So moving to the blue quadrant, how do you think blue feelings are helpful, and what activities? So unpleasant and less energetic moods, they're really helpful when maybe we're looking at someone else's work. Maybe when someone asks you to review or edit their writing, and you have to provide critical opinions, maybe like a critique, what they did well, what they didn't. Or maybe, when we talk about natural disasters, or even the things that we're experiencing right now, when a lot of people are experiencing grief and hunger and just a lot of struggles, those things might make us feel blue, but that's appropriate, right? Like it's not out of the box to feel that way. It's understandable to feel that way, and there's a time and a place, right, to feel that way. And that's also where empathy comes in. Like when you see someone struggle, that causes something in you, and that's your body processing that information, right? So empathy is important, and when we see other human beings struggling or facing adversity, it's an empathic response in us that makes us maybe feel blue along with them. And then moving on to the green quadrant, which are the pleasant but less energetic moods. Activities like studying or reading, or if you have to write a reflection, like a reflection journaling, being in the green would probably be a really good place for you to be. Or maybe if you're reading poetry, maybe that will calm you down and relax you. Or maybe when if you have to take a test and you're maybe gravitating more towards the red because you're getting worried or nervous about it, thinking like, okay, how can I be more in the green? How can I be calm before a big test so that I can think clearly and I can answer correctly? And so this is where a lot of breathing techniques come in place. Taking deep breaths, it's sometimes when someone is getting agitated, we jokingly tell them like, oh, just count till 10, or, breathe. But it really does help. Breathing creates changes in our nervous system. And so it's important to intentionally breathe and learn techniques to help us be in the green when we need to. And then last but not least, the yellow, so those pleasant and energetic moods. These emotions are really helpful when you're trying to be creative, when you're trying to come up with new ideas, or coming up with solutions for something, or also when you have to do group work. I know if you have siblings out there, it's really helpful when you're feeling yellow, because it's more likely that you're going to collaborate with other people. Or maybe when you have to write, or when learning about other cultures, maybe about traditions or festivals. Those are maybe things that make us feel what we call yellow. So going back to the acronym that I mentioned earlier, RULER, remember that it helps us memorize each of the 5 steps to do when we're dealing with emotions. So the first step, the first R, is recognizing that emotions. So some of the questions that we can ask ourselves is, where am I on the mood meter? How much energy do I have? How much pleasantness do I feel? And then going to the second step, understanding why we feel the way we do. We need to ask ourselves things like, why do I feel this way? What caused this feeling? Where is this feeling coming from? And keep in mind that sometimes it won't be something noticeable or something specific. Sometimes we feel the way we feel and we don't even know why, and that's fine, but just being aware of that is powerful. And then the third step, labeling and describing our emotions. So thinking, what word best describes how I'm feeling right now? And if you can't come up with a word yourself, I happen to have an application, the Mood Meter application on my phone, and it's very, very helpful because you can click on a word and learn the definition, and then you can kind of determine whether it fits how you're feeling right now or not. And that's another way that we can increase our vocabulary, our feelings vocabulary. And then the fourth step is expressing our emotions. So we can ask questions like, how am I showing this feeling? What is my face doing? What is my body language communicating? What does my behavior tell others about how I feel? And the fifth and final step is regulating emotion. We have to ask ourselves, is this feeling helpful? If so, how will I continue feeling this way? And if it's not helpful, what strategy will I use to change my feelings? That's the RULER acronym that I use to help me remember what are the different steps to deal with my emotions. And I know that at first it might be like, oh, that's a lot to do for just one emotion, but the more you practice it, it's like any other skill. The more you practice it, the easier it becomes and the more second nature it becomes. But really, this is a journey. This is something that you should do continually throughout your day. And the more you do it, the easier it'll become, for sure. So I hope that you get creative with your mood meters at home. I would love to see what you come up with. If you feel comfortable sharing your mood meters, I would love to see your posts on social media. I work for a nonprofit called the Opportunity Project, and if you tag us, we're on Facebook and Instagram as the Opportunity Project. We would love to see your mood meters on there. So I hope you enjoyed learning more about emotions. I hope that both the mood meter and the ruler acronym help you explore your emotions, and I hope that you also come up with your own activities on how you can become what we call emotion scientists. We don't want to be emotion judges. Like I said, there's no bad emotion, and that applies not only to us, but to other people. So when we see or recognize an emotion in another person, instead of jumping into conclusions or jumping into judgments, maybe just take a moment to ask yourself, like, how are they feeling? Why are they feeling that way? And like I said, all we can do is guess on other people, and it's best to just ask how they're feeling to understand each other better and make sure that we're supporting each other accordingly. So thank you so much for having me today. I hope you enjoyed this activity, and we'll be seeing you next week.